What if I told you World War I wasn't only triggered by an assassination, but financed by men who could profit from chaos? A war that killed millions, collapsed empires, and reshaped civilization may have created fortunes for people who never fired a shot. Because while soldiers drown in mud, someone was making money. And once you understand how wars are funded, history starts looking less accidental and far more engineered. The story we're taught is simple. A prince is killed in Sarajevo. Alliances activate. Europe erupts. World War. But real history is rarely simple, because wars don't run on patriotism. They run on money. And in 1914, money meant bankers, private financiers, central banks, international credit networks, men operating far from trenches, but close to power. And some believe they didn't just profit from the war. They helped make it possible. Think about what modern war really is. It isn't only soldiers charging across fields. It is an industrial machine. Millions of uniforms, rifles, and artillery shells by the millions. Battleships, rail systems, food supply chains, medical systems. Factories running day and night. Every hour of war burns money. Every day of war burns fortunes. No government was prepared for how expensive this war would become. Many thought it would be over in months. It lasted years. And governments started bleeding cash. Fast. Taxes weren't enough. Gold reserves weren't enough. So nations did what nations always do when desperate. They borrowed. And suddenly war was not only a military conflict, it was a credit machine, a machine fed by debt, and debt has owners. At the beginning, people celebrated war. Crowds cheered in city streets. Young men rushed to enlist. Many believed it would be glorious, quick, heroic. They called it the war to be over by Christmas. But almost immediately, that illusion shattered. Machine guns changed everything. Trench warfare changed everything. As the human cost exploded, so did the financial costs. With every new offensive, more loans were needed, more bonds issued, more money raised. War had become something larger than governments could control, and financial power moved in to sustain it. Before World War I, a handful of banking powers already shaped global finance. The Rothschild network, J.P. Morgan, powerful European banking houses. These weren't ordinary businessmen. They financed governments, managed sovereign debt, influenced markets, and often stood close to political elites. Then war arrived. And suddenly their role became enormous, because governments needed financing at historic scale. And whoever finances a war gains leverage. Massive leverage. Britain borrowed heavily. France borrowed heavily. Germany developed its own financing systems. Every side needed money, constantly, and financial institutions became arteries keeping the war alive. Some historians stop there. Others ask a darker question. Did some powerful interests see war not as catastrophe, but opportunity? Because where governments see survival, financiers may see expansion, and sometimes both happen at once. Take J.P. Morgan. Its role during the war was enormous. It helped arrange financing, handled huge purchasing operations, connected governments with American industry, weapons, steel, supplies, credit. The scale was staggering. And when money, industry, and war merge, something changes. Conflict becomes economics. And economics creates incentives. That doesn't prove conspiracy, but it does raise questions. Because when powerful institutions benefit from prolonged conflict, what pressures exist against peace? That question haunted the 20th century, and maybe still does. War destroys, but it can also enrich. That contradiction is disturbing, because it's true. Weapons producers expanded. Banks issued loans. Interest accumulated. Bond markets boomed. Entire industries surged. And the longer war dragged on, the larger this financial machinery grew. Some fortunes were made in Reconstruction, others during the war itself. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. For ordinary people, war meant suffering. For some powerful interests, war meant movement of enormous wealth. And once profit attaches itself to conflict, the moral picture gets darker. Because peace may be idealistic, but war can be lucrative. And history has often punished nations while rewarding financiers. But wars need more than money. They need public support. And governments sold bonds directly to citizens. Posters urge families to invest, support the troops, buy war bonds, save the nation. Ordinary people financed war too often believing they were defending civilization, and in many ways they were. But behind patriotic campaigns, financial systems deepened, debt expanded. Governments became tied to creditors. And war wasn't just fought by armies anymore. Entire populations became economically enlisted. That scale was unprecedented and terrifying. Now here's something many people overlook. Wars don't only create destruction, they create debt. Massive debt. Debt that survives long after peace treaties. Governments borrowed staggering sums, and after the war, those debts remained. Generations carried them. Taxes paid them. Economies bent under them. Some historians argue the post-war debt burden helped to stabilize Europe itself and helped lay conditions for even greater disaster. World War II. Think about that. Debt from one war, possibly feeding the next. A cycle. Conflict. Debt. Instability. More conflict. And once you see that pattern, it's hard to unsee. There's an old quote often repeated. Permit me to issue and control the money, and you know the rest. Because control over money can mean influence over nations, not always openly, not always maliciously, but power all the same. Governments rise and fall, currencies collapse, empires disappear, yet financial institutions often endure. That continuity is what fascinates researchers. Because political leaders may change, systems often remain. And sometimes systems outlive everyone who built them. There is no evidence bankers alone caused World War I. That claim oversimplifies history. The causes were vast. Nationalism, imperial rivalry, militarism, alliance systems, political failure, all mattered. But another argument remains. Not that financiers created the war, but that financial interests helped sustain it and profited from its continuation. That argument deserves examination because it shifts the question from who started the war to who benefited from the war. And those are not the same question. The men dying in trenches didn't see bond markets. They saw barbed wire, poison gas, mud, death, but above those trenches, another struggle existed. Loans, influence, power, profit, a battlefield hidden behind ledgers. And that hidden layer of history is rarely what textbooks emphasize, because once you follow the money, wars start looking different. Not simpler, darker. Maybe bankers didn't secretly start World War I, but they may have helped fuel it, finance it, profit from it, and benefit from the systems it created. And that raises a bigger question. If financial power can benefit from war, how many later conflicts followed similar patterns? How much of history was shaped not only by generals and kings, but by money? Because maybe the real battlefield was never only in the trenches. Maybe it was also in banks, in debt, in credit, in invisible power, and maybe it still is. Because sometimes the people shaping history aren't the ones on the front lines. They're the ones funding them.